What are we going to talk about today? Technology.
Were we?
Yeah, technology. I want to, you got me excited about technology when you talked to the other guy about transhumanism. And man, talk about conspiracy theories. I love me some technology conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And there's just so much to unpack with technology because it's exactly what we talked about before. It's you can look at everything, all of the different nodes of what's happening now, like all the different elements of technology and where it stands currently. And there's so many people that are trying to project into the future where this technology is going to take us. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it going to take over the human race? Is it going to make us obsolete as humans? Are we going to use it to become immortal? Where is this taking us? There's so many questions. And so that's what makes it a fun subject, but also, I'd like to talk about all that, but I also like to bring it back down to earth and just like literally what's the next iteration? Like what's from here? What's the next layer? And also what does technology mean to the human race? Like, what is it? I see everything as a reflection of a certain principle, and how does it fit into that paradigm? And I'm usually bringing up the wave. Like, how does that fit in there? So, I mean, man, I'm sure I don't know how much you got into in your last conversation about technology. Is there any like salient points you wanted to bring up, or
I always come unprepared, and I never watch these back. That particular video, we don't have the audio, so who knows what was said. I remember some like general things, but I couldn't start them off on a point. They're mostly like, it was organic. I don't know. So
yeah, I feel you.
I'm sure they'll come up, the important bits that I've got to contribute. So
yeah. Well, trying to remember what got me so juiced on technology. The main thing, I guess, to me, and I feel like this should be the end of the talk, but why not start off with it and kick it off? I once wrote a short story. I don't think I've ever released it anywhere, but it was about technology and how, what's the end goal? Like, what are we looking to do here? Like, what do we really want to use technology for? It's been, used for a great many things. And, but really it's just like anything else. We're trying to expand ourselves. We're trying to further our reach and make it easier to overcome obstacles and make life easier for us and more predictable, and order that chaos so that we can see into the future, so that we can predict the outcomes of certain situations a little bit easier and feel confident about it, right? And my short story was all about this company, technology company, that was stating they kind of came to the apex of all their different departments. It was like they basically built a robot. They built a robot that can do all the things that we needed to do. It was basically the next iteration of the human. And they were saying, they got it down to where the robot could make decisions within an instant. Like it could take in a great many variables, a lot of different elements into its processing unit, and then spit out an action that it could take, an optimal action forward. It was saying that its body was regenerative, so it could keep if it got hurt, or if somebody tried to attack it or something, it could basically restore its skin or whatever part of the body it had. And they're just going down the lists of all the things that you would need in a robot, or that we're working towards as a society to put into technology, robots, computation, all that stuff. And I got a little more into it because, again, it's a short story, so it takes a long time for the buildup. But then they unveil it, and it's literally just like, it looks just like a human sitting there.
Right.
And, you know, it's just like any robot movie you would see, any sci-fi robot movie. And come to find out, like the description of everything, I got very descriptive with every part of that, what is the apex of the robot. And it ends up just being a human. It
Mm-hmm.
needs to learn to adapt to future situations. Its cells need to regenerate so that it can, you know, move along the evolution of its biology, to continue into the future. So basically, it's just like you realize, oh, he's just describing a human the whole time, you know. And the main point I was really trying to drive home is that the technology is just a reflection of us. It's again, it's like, what do we need as humans to make ourselves greater than we currently are? And that is taking the principles that we currently use, right? The things that we do in our brains, and trying to expand them and figure out how do we solidify things, right? We only have a certain amount of brain power. You know, we have limitations on our brain. I can't remember every single moment of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, these are a lot of the principles that I read about in that book that you gave me, Ospensky.
Which one?
Which one did you give me?
New
The
Model of the Universe?
No, it was the human evolution one.
Oh, the Psychology of Human Evolution.
Exactly.
The Psychology of Possible Human Evolution?
Yeah,
Dude, that is such a great book.
It is a good
I totally forgot about it. I don't have a copy anymore. I had like 4 or 5 at one time.
I don't know. I think I might still have it. Or no, did I give it back to you? I remember I read the whole thing, and then I might have given it back to you before you left.
Well, dude, it's so concise too. It just has like a few diagrams and like, you know, 3-page chapters, just laying it out. It's like
exactly, bam, 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 and it's just filled with good information, like just good thoughts. And yeah, so that's kind of where that came from. Is like we're just building the psyche to a better standard. Like, again, we can't remember every single moment of our life. It's not like we're a computer that can pull up a file that has a database of, you know, hey, show me this memory of, you know, October 21st, 1994, and then I can just see everything that happened that day in my brain. Like, we can't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what our body does is we take in experiences, and it alters our DNA in some way, shape, or form. It alters our consciousness. It just changes. There's all this stimuli around us that changes us slightly, and the more often we face these factors, the more it changes us, and we come up with these conditioned responses to move about the world, right? So that's our body's kind of has this like predictive algorithm that it's using to move about the world. And it does it in a way that it doesn't really store specifics. It just kind of takes this this paradigm, this what I've been talking about, that waveform, that balance between opposites, and then choosing one path in that balance. It kind of just uses that over and over and over again to find a way forward. We get stuck in ideologies. We get, all these things that we cling to. And then that's just what we use as our inherent automatic response.
See, I think the system is going to move you forward. But you were saying, like, so the more you face these obstacles, the more you grow. Let's just say it like that. And then you said we have, conditioned responses. Those conditioned responses, help us avoid facing those things, which ultimately the system is giving to us to help us grow.
Yeah.
But our conditioning actually takes us in a, where there is progress no matter what, or change, or whatever you want to call it, whatever word you want to use, but we are fixed in a, whatever.
Yeah.
So that can happen. And when that happens, the balance is definitely disrupted.
Yeah.
So the system's going to make the balance. Ultimately, it's going to go that way anyway. You can grind against it. So then if technology is a reflection of ourselves, then anything we make from this general state of conditioned responses to help us grow won't, not optimally help us grow. It wouldn't be cooperating with it. If we were the reflection, if we're making our reflection, we're not in that mode to face the challenges, to grow deliberately, you know?
Yeah.
We're not in that habit. If we were and then made technology, it would turn around and it would grow exponentially, but we don't really see that. Technology itself grows exponentially, but we're still, and I think this is what I was saying at the end of the last episode, it's coming to me. Basically, we are still Neanderthals in a lot of ways. We're very primitive. We have some deadly shit in our hands because we don't know ourselves yet, you know?
Exactly. And so that's kind of, you know, the last half of my book, that's where it takes it, is like, it's all balanced. There's, you can take any direction from that, where, okay, so it's kind of like we have our biology. And like you said, say we're Neanderthals. We're this primitive form of a human, right? We want to evolve ourselves. We want to evolve literally ourselves, our biology, the things that are inherently already programmed in us. We want to change them to become the next iteration of human.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, what we do with technology is we say there's this problem we have to overcome. There's this challenge that we're facing. Let's build this thing outside of the human body that helps us to supplement our shortcomings, right? Instead, and it's kind of, again, from that Ouspensky book, it's like, what if these principles that we're instilling in this technology, again, the memory recall, what if, and that's just you know, an example, memory recall. Right. What if we were to try to push our biological humanness towards that? Like, what if we tried to, instead of building a technology outside of ourselves, build a technology within ourselves? You know,
But I don't like the word technology in that sense.
Okay.
I think we were talking about that too. I mean, it gets sort of, the connotation is like a sci-fi thing when you say build a new inward technology. I don't think Ouspensky was talking about, I wouldn't include putting a chip in you.
Exactly.
Like
No.
It's not
like
that
literally
technology.
So
the principles of the technology you want to give to a robot. Exactly. Can you apply that? And that's what I mean. If you could apply it, if we all could apply it, then the things we make to help us extend our reach would be of a different order. It would go a different direction.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And but there, and what I was saying is there's many ways you can kind of use this to take this principle, because we're building the technology outside of ourselves. You just said it a couple minutes ago. What happens is you're not allowed, you've now, quote unquote, overcome the challenge in some way. So your body is not going to need to adapt now. So it's kind of like, you know, a good example is people always talk about, ever since I have a cell phone where I can put in all my friends' phone numbers, I don't remember my friends' phone numbers anymore. Sure. Like, who remembers phone numbers? You just have it at a click. There's no reason to, right? But there's something about that, again, memory recall. If you remember all your friends' phone numbers, like, if you think about it, that's at least 7 digits. You're remembering 7-digit codes, and you're remembering a lot of them. And now you're practicing memory recall. So things like that, I have to write things down all the time now and put things in my calendar, and so, because I'm getting worse and worse at remembering things because I'm not practicing how to remember things, right? So there's that aspect of the technology is taking away the opportunity for us to make these changes within ourselves. But on the other side of the coin, and this is also not talked about a lot, and we've hit on this point before. When we are stagnant in some type of system, we become depressed, we become emotional, we become angry, we become anxious. You know, if we're not growing as humans, if there's no challenge to overcome, we don't grow. We think life is pointless. There's no reason for me to move on because I'm not becoming something new and greater, right? So what seems to happen with humans is, because we've overcome our environment, because all of these daily challenges that we used to face, like where's my food coming from? Where's my, there's nobody trying to kill me right now. When things start settling in, that anxiety starts settling in. Again, you don't have this kind of outside force to overcome all the time. So what we do is we start creating our own outside forces. Like we start creating our own issues. We start creating our own political issues. We start fighting with people about anything so that I could feel that I won an argument or won a battle, or I can feel better about myself, right? And I feel like technology, when we create it, it kind of feeds into that opportunity but people don't see it this way. And this is what, to me, the issue is like, again, this technology I've created shows me that there's this adaptation in our environment that can happen. Again, this thing has the ability to recall specific moments, specific things, and do all that. But I can't right now. So I'm just going to leave it to that. That's what most people say. Where I say, I want to do that within me. Like, I don't want this outside thing. I want to evolve to the next level. And because I see that this is possible, and I can kind of see how the person that built this computer put this thing together to make it happen, what is that reflection in my brain that I can make happen so I can get the memory recall? Again, that whole, I don't remember, I'm not practicing my memory anymore because of technology. I recognize that. And now I use that as the momentum to say, I want to practice making my memory better. So again, it's like you can create your own nemesis to overcome it and become a better person. But the first thing you have to recognize is that, everybody goes, this is a tool for me to use to become a better person. It's like, no, that tool is your nemesis actually. And you need to overcome it and become a better person and evolve into the tool that you thought you needed. That's what most people don't do. It's like, I already have a computer. Why do I need to think about math? I can just have a calculator. Why do I even need to think about these things? It's because you need to evolve, or else you're going to become anxious, depressed, and all the rest of it. So, again, double-edged sword. You can take it, you can use the negative aspects as positive aspects if you really want to. You just have to recognize that you can, and that you need to, really.
I don't think many people know anything about, have an inkling about that. So how does that occur to somebody this might occur to somebody who's actually building a program to put into a robot, and then can look at that and say, what does that reflect about me? And that's one kind of person. But generally, the general consumer of technologies that take care of things for you so you can rot, how are they going to see it differently? Because otherwise we're just singing at the choir, I think, which is, we've talked about this point a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the question, Bodhi. It's always like, how do you flip that switch? How do you like realize that? And really, it's, for me, it was just, I become obsessive about what's the evolution of this system? Like, what's the next thing coming? How can I predict what's going to be, what's the optimal way forward for this? And that's because I'm just personally obsessed with that whole notion. So I'm always thinking about, when I hear people's conversations about technology, and, there's always the two sides. Somebody says, if we keep going in this direction, robots are going to take over the earth and make us obsolete. And what if they become conscious and realize they don't need us and kill us all off because we were the last iteration, and
they already are conscious. They already, as like primitive as those programs are, they do things that autonomously, they make their decisions on, by themselves. You heard about the two that from Facebook, those two robots that developed their own language and stopped letting the human beings that were monitoring them, know what they were saying, and they shut them off. Like, that's a clear sign of, well, it's obviously it was always possible that could happen, but you see it so early on, and it's like, well, that's probable. We should, proceed carefully here, but usually we don't.
Yeah, and it's kind of like that. Man, the consciousness conversation is a much bigger one, but just to throw this out there, I do kind of subscribe to the Bohm philosophy on consciousness, which is that consciousness is, there's not like a moment in time or space where consciousness becomes. It's really just a potential of the whole universe and all systems. Not to say that it's like a God, what's the term? Not to say that like every cell is completely conscious. I think there's varying,
sentience.
yeah, I think there's varying levels, really. You know, there's like, if there is such thing as no consciousness and such thing as a complete consciousness, there's a whole spectrum in between. And most things, if not all things, lie on that spectrum, right? The only thing I would say that's completely conscious would be the totality of everything, you know, what some people would call God, or the apex of everything and nothing, and whatever you want to call that. And I'd say we're not fully conscious. We're lying on a spectrum. We're on one level of that spectrum, and everything else is on lower levels. And we've talked about that before, about how it's kind of like, and I said when it came to free will and consciousness and stuff like that, I said we have free will and we also don't have free will at the same time, because we do have these conditioned responses, including the ones in our brains creating our thoughts. So the driver is the system itself. It's not this ethereal being within space-time. We think we're, this very specific self, right? Really, there's this system that's creating this feeling of a self. But the fact that it creates the feeling of free will means free will exists. Like, there's a thing called free will that we can impose. We can impose that word, that title, on the thing that we're feeling as such. But really, the system is driving in that direction. It's making us feel like that, right?
Yeah.
So to me, consciousness, like the way we feel it, is just a certain form of it. It's like, it's one label on that spectrum. It's one pinpoint on that spectrum that we're experiencing.
Yeah. I mean, that was the terminology that whatever the title of that Ouspensky book was, is that, because he studied under Gurdjieff, and that whole thing was that we are asleep right now.
Yeah.
As if asleep. And our next iteration is as if waking from a dream. So to free will, I think before you wake up in that way that they're describing, it's not that you can't do things, but the things that you do are predetermined by such, deep things or things from the past or whatever that you don't even see. So
yeah,
although you're making choices, it's not free because it's conditioned.
Exactly.
But if you wake up, then you can sort of employ this system of free will or whatever from, not a conditioned point, not a conditioned place, so that free will is actually free to move in more directions beyond the conditioned. So I think that's the next iteration.
Yeah, and that waking up, to me, it always leads to more sleep, which always leads to more waking up. And the way I kind of visualize it is, like when he was talking about that in the book, it's kind of like, I could go my whole day riding on my conditioned responses. My environment isn't chaotic at all. I go to work, I come home to stable environment, I have the same routines, the same things going on, I eat the same thing. There's nothing really crazy happening, right? There's not really too many directions I could take. Well, I could take a lot of directions, but I choose not to, because I just ride on those conditioned responses. But to me, the waking up is that moment where it's almost like the whole playing field clears away, and you realize that actually there's an infinite amount of choices I could make, choices that I would never even have fathomed making, because my conditioned responses put this layer of kind of like definitiveness, and then the moment that clears away and I realize, see, I could just go run into the woods naked right now. That is an option. Like that's something I could be doing right now. As soon as you that moment that clears away, that's the waking up. Like, anything is possible. I could be doing anything anything could happen right now. But then again, what happens is, say you make a choice in that realm, that wokeness. I don't even know what else to call it. I hate that word, but in that wokeness, you make a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
You eventually, and this is what we were kind of going with in the last couple podcasts, but it's, you go into that chaos, you learn something, you do something, you make an action in that chaos, which then becomes part of your DNA, a conditioned response. It's like this new thing that I learned is now ingrained in me. And so the optimal path for me is to always try to get into that awakened state and then come back and integrate it into the conditioned response, awakened state, conditioned response. And so that's where, to me, it's like, it's a series of becoming awake, because we're always evolving. We're never, if you're not evolving, that means you're stagnating, which leads to the depression, the anxiety, and the rest of it, because your body's telling you, this isn't what life's about.
Sure.
Life is about continuing to try to become awake and then take that in.
Well, it's very sticky, this spot we're getting in, because I don't know if I'd put it that way. I don't know if the waking state that is cleared and opened, I don't know if I would call that chaos. So I think when you enter into that state where anything can happen, I wouldn't call that chaos. Whereas in this sleeping state where you think things are going to happen this way, and you have these responses, and yet something chaotic can happen. That's chaos, where anything can happen in a limited way. But if you open it up, I wouldn't say that at that point you're going into chaos to learn something to bring back. But I'm not disagreeing that it's like a constant deepening of that wakingness.
I guess it could be, maybe it's your feeling in the space, because the way I see it, it's an ultimate unknowing. If you're not using your conditioned responses, you may not know your body isn't going to inherently know how to react to any situation, or maybe it does. But it's kind of like, if you're in that ultimate unknowing space and you're fearful of it, I can see that as chaos. If you're in that ultimate unknowing space and you're willing to accept anything that comes from it, maybe
we have to define the space, this next space, because in it, if it's clear, if there's no conditioning, then there is no individual. Then there is no individual who feels fear or anything or one way or the other. It's all open. It's clear. There's no me in the field. It's just an empty field.
That's true.
And in that empty field, things are happening, and I come across them. You don't think if in this theoretical, for the moment, state of mind, that if you were totally open, not the one in the field, but just the field, and all of a sudden, and you're walking across the street and you almost get hit by a car, do you think that you have to know anything to do something about that? I mean, you will get hit or you won't, whether you do whatever or not, or know anything or not. But I think if you weren't, necessarily thinking about self-preservation, you would act just like an animal would act or something, without, it has this sense more than it has like, oh, my life,
So you're getting you can be in both spaces.
Well, I think that without the individual, consciousness itself can take care of itself in a, time, space, 3D. It doesn't need the personality and the consciousness as we have it. It can be baser. And as we can see, many things survive at a baser level. It can be like that. And I'm not saying that waking up is a baser level, but it is like as simple as a baser level. I mean, if you were walking down the street in that, baser level, woken up or whatever, and someone spoke to you, you'd have to come back into words or conditioning. So you have to come back for sure. But I don't know if it's, me leaving from where I am into that to grab something, to bring something back. I think they coexist, and there's something that can sort of switch between them.
Yeah. So and again, because our brains have to separate these things out, the way I again visualize it or think it through or reason it is that I understand what you're saying, and to the amount that I can physically. It's literally like there's different levels to this thing. What I was
Okay.
speaking to was more of the evolution of the physical body and how it takes and goes through cycles of chaos and taking it and ordering it and putting it within yourself. When we're
Sure.
talking about that,
Yeah, that all
I
takes
kind of
place in the usual realm, what you were referring to.
exactly. I'm thinking, and then what
I
you're talking
understand.
about is kind of like a higher
Right,
higher
right. So we're
level.
getting in this gray
Yeah.
area, and I want to have them
Yep.
separated. Like, well, what do we mean by this
Yep.
other area? So we're not blending between them. But yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
that was the normal
Yeah, I was kind of
situation.
pointing towards like certain aspects of ourselves evolving, right?
Right.
And then
Mhm.
what I would say you're pointing towards is like the totality of me. Like I could be
Well,
whatever that I could not be in this self state and just let, like you said, I like that term, let consciousness take care of itself.
yeah, yeah,
Just let
yeah,
it go off, you know?
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I see it there.
I mean,
Um
so real quick, this came to mind. We're talking about, you know, so baser realities can function fine or whatever, and we can sort of be in a simpler consciousness and still be fine. And yet it's all the things that you were talking about in the other realm, the interaction with chaos, the bringing it back and incorporating that, kind of makes it sound like a thing that can happen or not. But I see it as something that is definitely happening. There are experiences leave physical marks on the brain, they
mhm.
like records.
Yeah.
So if you can live in a world optimally where you're in this open space that's much simpler, wherein there is no fear or anxiety or whatever, and all of those things which wear down your system, if you can eliminate those wearing downs, you keep your mind fresh, you know,
Mhm.
and that is how you get to the next point.
Yeah.
But right now, what we normally do is, we have this technology. It takes care of something. On the one hand, it frees us up so that we can pursue ideas like this, but we don't. We free them up so we can make up, our own monsters or whatever, which is, more of the cycle that is, making indentations on our machine,
Yeah.
wearing us down. And so, if you could let that go, and if you could just as a switch go into that other zone, you would be functioning already, just starting off. You would maintain a different vibration or frequency or whatever, a higher one, and you would be more inclined to go that direction. So I think the first thing is like kind of sweeping away the normal shit, which is why I brought that up at that point. Like, well, we got to kind of talk to, we can't be singing to the choir. I think people that are interested in that and are passionate about that, it's happening to them one way or
Yeah.
the other. But so what about these guys? Because like
So let me
counts. We all count together,
I want to basically just rephrase everything you just said, but in
Please.
the physical realm, because again, I think because most people identify with the current physical state that we're in, a lot of
Right.
people could latch onto this idea, and I think we've talked about this before. But when it comes to the brain, generally what happens is when you think of something or you come into a situation and you have those inherent ideological responses, um, there's a neural path that reflects what that response is or what that thought is or whatever you're picturing or whatever you want to say is happening in your mind, right? There's a neural response. It's literally like a neural path that follows A to B to C to D. So it's like,
Mhm.
think of a giraffe. That giraffe is A, B, C, D. And every time you
Mhm.
think of a giraffe, those neurons fire to equal a giraffe, right?
Sure.
And every time you think of a giraffe, those neurons are firing. It's just like a muscle. What happens is the more those neurons fire, the stronger that neural path becomes. And so what happens is it becomes easier for those neurons to fire and get that signal done and over with in a faster time. Like literally, it's just ease. It's the ease. So
habit.
Yeah, it's
path of least resistance.
Exactly. You know? So when we're thinking of these ideologies and we have these conditioned responses, the more we use the conditioned responses, the more those neural paths strengthen, the deeper it is, the deeper the groove is, as you said, you know,
harder to get grooves,
out. It's hard to get out. And at the same time, those paths not used are withering away. So when we're maturing, when we're, you know, growing as a human, we really start off with the largest amount of our neurons when we're younger. Like the brain formulates pretty quick. And what happens is you start strengthening neural paths and other ones start withering. It takes a really long time for those things to wither away and for you to actually lose those neural paths. Like it's very rare that happens, but it does happen, especially if you're just in these conditioned responses the whole time. Those things are just weakening, making it harder to change your mind, making it harder for you to say, what is this other way I could think, right? So that's kind of the tit for tat area. It's like, okay, well, what if I started strengthening these other paths, right? What if I started being more open-minded and thinking about these other paths, right? Well, now, you know, you can get into this, well, okay, well, now those are strengthened, and what about the other ones you're not? You know, you can get into kind of this paradox of like, how do I build that? So what you and I suggest is there's this whole, again, that's thinking about it in the tit for tat area. If you think about it as a whole, the optimal path would be to strengthen all neurons in all neural paths, which means staying open to any possible combination, right?
Which is that other area.
Yeah.
Yeah. As much as you can. As much as you can within your sleep, stay awake.
Yeah, exactly.
What you're trying to do. But my issue with this is that there are some people that the groove is so deep and the number of passageways is so limited that even the idea, like you said, like someone might, you know, realize you got to be, you know, open or whatever. But that openness, if that isn't even a possibility in the brain, how would it even occur to go that direction? One. And two, let's say you're not as deep and it does occur to you and you're limited, you know, you're not as limited, but still the paths you would take out of the path is the path you would always take. You know what I'm saying? So like you kind of have to change in order to change.
Yep.
So that is why I always bring up this point about, you know, the tit for tat area or whatever, just the general person, because some people, you know, we've talked about this too, like at a certain age, I don't know the science, but you know, at 30 or whatever it is, like you're kind of set in those passageways, generally speaking.
Yeah. I think it's 25 is generally around the time when most people's brains have fully matured. The cortex, like the higher learning portion of your brain, that's when it's fully developed.
And there are still definite cases of people who are older than this age who have been a certain way, and then, you know, I don't know, something happens to them and they're totally different. So it's not that the brain is like finished or whatever. It could be if you remain there, but like there's still like leaps to go. But I think that whatever scientists figure that out, the 25 or 30 year old.
Well, again, your brain stops growing. Like you don't have the ability to produce any more neurons, but you can change the direction that those neural paths take.
Sure.
It doesn't have to be A, B, C, D. It could be A, F, E, L. The A through Z is still there. That's all you got.
Right.
But you can change the directions, which then is changing your mind.
But the issues I brought up still do apply, and I know, like theoretically, that could happen. But
so I want to
there's some sticky stuff in there.
I want to hit that point. There's kind of two things. And it's something I missed on my last point, which is the feeling of it. So if I'm reasoning through something and I take the ABCD route, right? I'm reasoning it out. I'm thinking about it. I can visualize words and phrases and things in my brain. That's really going to hardline that neural route. The other way, the way I kind of feel the other one is, again, it's like my brain feels relaxed. There's not this active cognitive thinking going on. It's not this, I'm not visualizing words and phrases in linear paths and stuff like that. My brain just feels like it's like off, right? It's like in this meditative state. And as things come in, it's almost like I don't even have to think about it. There's this like background system running, this ease of use where things come in and it just gently spits it back out, and it generally seems to be the optimal path. And the only way you can get there is by, again, practicing the having the whole system work in that way, by practicing thinking about all of the paths and learning how you get your brain to be in that state. So it's not like you can, when you say like, how do people change their minds? It's not like you can, you could automatically go, okay, instead of taking these ideological paths in my brain, I'm just going to start, really thinking about all situations and all predictions, right? It's hard to get into that state. So what you're asking is like, how does the normal person get there? And honestly, the older you get, the harder it gets physically, right? But like you said, there's some situations that people get in where it can happen in an instant. It can happen over time. Maybe there's a path you get on. Maybe you take a meditation course, a yoga class, or whatever your calling is, and then you slowly start to change your brain and relax it, right? For a lot of people, it is psychedelics, because literally what psychedelics do is they kind of shove those neural paths into other routes, and they go, look at this, look at that, look at this, look at that. It forces you to see these other perspectives, and that's generally the kind of the kickstart where people, they get a very intense glimpse into what that brain state looks like, and then you start to question it, and then you become indoctrinated.
But I mean, so you and I have gone there. How many people would you say of, like, friends you've had, your age or abouts growing up, have taken that introductory course, that crash course? How many people would you say that have taken psychedelics?
Actually, because I'm in California and also the people I grew up with, I would say most of the people I know.
Okay. Yeah. Good. More the better in this case. Yeah. And so I have, a number of friends. I could say like 10 or 15 people like have taken that crash course. And now out of your number, I have my own number, but out of yours, how many of those people have entered, the path into all paths? How many people have taken it that direction? Because you don't have to. And ultimately no one has to. That's not what I mean. Is you don't have to necessarily come away with what we did in that experience. You might be forced to see a bunch of different things, but as soon as when you're coming down, you feel like, am I ever going to be myself again? And then you wake up and then you're like, oh yeah, I am. And so the normal person can be like, oh, thank God I'm back. All that was, and they could categorize that in a certain way and never look that direction again. Or it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to pursue that now.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if it's the best door in, because it doesn't directly take you, anywhere, specific after the fact.
I don't think it's the best door in. It's definitely a door. Yeah, it's the quickest, and it's a door, and it's one of the most extreme doors. So again, it's the probability of you returning and really holding it as some kind of transformative experience. you might see it that way, but how much it actually transform you, again, that's what, at most, I don't know how long the longest trip is anymore, what, like 8 hours, you know, maybe
I
even
took
longer.
an 18-hour trip one time, man.
Exactly.
18.
And how many hours of your life are there? You know what I'm saying? Like, exactly.
Well, yeah.
It's not, it's
Well,
it could be and I'm not saying you should be just taking acid all the time to develop
no.
this idea,
That
but
was the one time, that was the first and last time I took it, dude. It was too much,
yeah.
but it was
You
something.
know what I'm saying, though? It's a small amount of time within the scope of things where you're not, unless you take that, what you learned, and integrate it within yourself and carry it with you further, it's just going to be that blip that you look back on and you go, wow, that was crazy.
Or not even think about, you can forget a lot of things, you know. Exactly. You can just, 20 years after that one trip, it's like, I don't know any, I didn't take that path to broaden that out, and I don't know what that was.
Yeah, so I really think it really has to do with the integration of, again, you go into that weird, chaotic world and you have to bring something back for you to evolve it. So it's the same idea with, you use a neural path, it strengthens, it becomes something, you use it again, use it again, use it again. But think of it as the whole brain as the neural path, where you're utilizing the whole brain. And when you take psychedelics, that's what it starts doing. It starts shooting off in neural paths in many different directions all at once. And then you need to take that principle and try to practice it and carry it with you later for it to develop into anything. And how do you get people to realize that and keep it going? And again, I would say that the people that I've surrounded myself with and just been immersed in, which again, I'm not, I'm not a social type person, so it's not like I'm going to parties and meeting the general, you know, the general community or anything like that. But the people that I do know, most of them have had these experiences, and most of them, I wouldn't say they're not diving as deep as we are, maybe in different ways, but they are definitely more open to conversation, suggestion, thinking in different ways than people that I know haven't done it, right? Like, I could be talking to them about these deeply ingrained archetypal ideas, and they'll listen. They'll be picking up what I'm putting down. But then if I talk to somebody else who hasn't done psychedelics, I know that most of the time they're going to be the dreaded phrase, well, I don't know about all that, but what I do know is, and then they go off about some tit for tat.
Right. I mean, I guess in my experience, most of these people, I mean, they are, well, for one thing, I think you have to be a little bit of an open person to be open to the idea of trying acid or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of people, they might be open, they might pick up these ideas, and usually they do because they heard something similar first on Joe Rogan or something like that. They'll go with you a certain depth. But in my experience, these people are almost gone the opposite direction because of that door. And I think that has to do with not only like what you bring back with you, but how you go into it. Now, you have to be open enough to take it. But I think a lot of people, especially the people around me, I mean, we were all younger. I wasn't taking it as ceremoniously as you should. I think now I was naive going into it, though I was open and I was expecting things to bring back and incorporate. That's why I did it, but I was still naive. And after so many times doing it, and there would be, a new person involved, I would always try to explain to them that like, this is serious and you should take it seriously, and give them all like the things that I didn't get with, just me and another newbie doing it together, like seeing what happens. Now I get to tell somebody like, yo, this is some stuff could happen. And, I always tell them that part about when you come down, you're going to feel like your mind's never going to come back together, but like it always does, unless you're doing like just tons and tons of Molly or something like that. Like you'd probably be all right, but so I mean, it's not a surefire way either, so like it'll get you in quick. It doesn't mean it doesn't necessarily help. That's a big part of that.
It's exactly what you said, how you go into it. And I subscribe to this theory, and I think you do too, that psychedelics aren't an enhancement or an additive to anything in your realm. It's really just exposing the way things really are. It's showing you, it's taking away the limitations that your brain imposes on your environment. And so by that measure, part of your environment is yourself. It is your feelings. It is how you interact with the world and how your body reacts to your environment. So if you're going in there depressed and anxious and it very well could expose to you all the things that you are depressed and anxious about so that you can face them, so you can overcome them. But that takes the will to face and overcome them. If you can allow it to just enhance those feelings by not facing and overcoming the things that are making you anxious and depressed to begin with.
For sure.
It's really up to you. And so, but I think the reason that most people don't succumb to that is because at the same time, it's giving you the tools to do it. It's showing you the paths on how you could overcome those things. It's kind of like extending a hand saying, I will help you through this, but first you just have to recognize and admit that this is what is happening. And if you can't do that, then I can't help you. You have to help yourself before I can help you. So, it could take it in any direction, and to say that it is the thing that, you just take it and then everything's fine. Like guys, just do acid and you'll get there. Like, no, there's work to be done. You still have to put in the work. It's just a tool.
I'm not, again, I don't get into a lot of articles or whatever. I see little blips now and then about stuff, but there's this idea, I guess, that, I think I was like in a grocery store, like a Whole Foods, and it had like, the magazines about spiritual living and all that, and a Whole Foods, what I'm talking about. So like whatever it was, like Lion's Roar magazine, and it was an article about how Zen Buddhism is, in certain places incorporating psychedelics into there, and should they? And that was the article. I didn't read it or whatever, but, and people say things like, it can, if you take small doses of, mushrooms or whatever, that can help with depression or whatever. And I don't know about all that. I don't know the stats and all that kind of stuff. But if that is true, I think that is going on at like a minute level, sort of like CBD or something. Like you're not really, there's some subtle thing going on, but it's not what we're talking about.
Yeah. I kind of think about it as it's almost like a technology. It's this outside thing that you're using to supplement what your brain could already be doing. And if you just evolved it to do that thing, it would be more accessible to you on a more regular basis. Where now that you're introducing this outside thing, it could help you along. It could be the thing that kind of you see as, well, I want to get there without this substance. How do I do that? So now it's helping you along. It's helping you to begin your path to overcoming and evolving your mind. But ultimately, you are using an additive thing. You're putting something in your body to make that happen. So It's not advisable to just keep doing that thing because you're not evolving yourself. You're adding something to it. Right. So it's just like technology, man. It's like you could, and again, you can use that for good, for personal good or personal bad. It could become either way. It's not that, I wouldn't say that they shouldn't continually take substances to get there, as long as they're evolving themselves along the way, right? Mm-hmm. If you get in that mindset where this is the only way to get there, so I have to take this to get there, well, now you're not really evolving.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
And this is actually something I want to bring up to tie it back into technology, is one of my favorite conspiracies is John C. Lilly's idea about technology. I think we've
Who's
talked about
this
it
guy?
before. You know.
Sounds familiar.
I think I gave you his book. I'm pretty sure you're the one I gave that. Maybe might have been somebody else. It's called. I think it's called Enter the Cyclone. Yeah.
Okay.
So John C. Lilly was a scientist that worked with dolphins. He's the one that really developed the whole current understanding we have of dolphin communication and how dolphins actually talk to each other. He was studying that, and what he would do is they actually built a house that was able to hold water so that they could live with the dolphins. And he started experimenting with taking acid and giving the acid to the dolphins to see if there's some kind of connection they could make or whatever. And then he was also the guy that made the float tank. He invented the float tank. So what he'd do is he made the float tank. He'd float in there. He'd take a bunch of ketamine, and what ended up evolving is when he would take ketamine and go in the float tank, he said that he would talk to aliens. Mind you, this is like a legitimate, like well-known scientist, like evolving these theories, but this is kind of like his side hustle, you know? You take a bunch of ketamine and go into the float tank. So he would talk to the aliens, and I'm not going to get all of the major points right, but basically the aliens told him that there's a good force to the world and there's the bad force to the world. And the bad force is the aliens were called the ECCO, the Earth Coincidence Control Office, Earth Coincidence Control Office. And what they would do is they would generate coincidences on the Earth so that to direct people into certain situations. They were kind of like the mind, the greater level mind that would have a certain goal that they would make things happen to direct the Earth into that certain goal, right? And they said the evil force that's always playing against them is called the oh God, I'm mad that I forgot it. But in essence, it's technology. It's machines. It's this soulless, lifeless computational system, rather than the cellular structure that makes up the organic, evolving structure that we are. It's like the opposite of that. It's literally the steel, rigid, non-evolving. Just they have one goal that you program, and that's all they can do. There's no learning, there's no evolving, there's no becoming greater. It just gets stuck in a stagnant state that stays that way until some outside force changes it to be anything different, right? So it's gonna bug me. I'm gonna look it up real quick. But so basically, they were saying that this is the evil force. It's this. Give me 1 second. C. Lilly, ECCO, evil force. SSI. Okay, so it was called the SSI, the Solid State Intelligence. So again, solid state, unmoving. So they're saying that was the evil force that was trying to take over the world, replace humans. And what it does is it uses humans to create it. So it uses the biology to create it and kind of infects the mind to use it, create it, evolve it until finally it becomes sentient enough or built enough or evolved enough to where it can overtake the rest of biology, hack biology, take it over and eliminate biology so that there's just solid state intelligence, right? So he's taking a bunch of ketamine, going to a float tank, and he's saying that the aliens are telling him this, and he basically wrote a bunch of articles and books and things saying like, this is what we have to look out for, is technology overtaking us. So that's between that and Ouspensky, the idea that, and you could go as crazy as using that as your ambition to think about this the idea that we need to evolve ourselves. But really, I just think it just makes sense that isn't that the whole point, is we want to evolve ourselves and not the things outside of us?
One would think. Seems obvious to me too, but
yeah. And so with Lily, I just think that technology can be used to supplement our drive to evolve ourselves. I don't think this, again, the good and bad is within us. There's no this, I'm a good person, I'm a bad person. We're on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, on a minute by minute basis, we're living within that tit for tat, this or that reality. And we're constantly making actions towards one or the other. We constantly make decisions on the meaning between one or the other. Like, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing for me? And we have to make that choice on a constant basis. And so I don't think that, per Lily, technology SSI is inherently bad. I don't think that's the case. I think it contains both options within it, just like we do.
Well, he uses like an unusual phrasing on the whole thing, and like, who knows, what a communication with an alien, like what that is. Like, well, was he hearing it in English, or was he like hearing in their language and now he has to bring it like, so for him to use these words, they might just be out of necessity more so than like a literal representation of what's going on when they say like this evil force is technology. And he might have just narrowed it down somehow, like intuitively felt that that's what that meant and used that word, but I don't know. I mean,
like create a story to drive the point, the narrative. You need a story for the narrative so that you can absorb it.
That is true, but this story would suggest that the evil things are like an actual robot or whatever. And I don't know if I can buy into that. I definitely like the whole setup of like, there's a community of extraterrestrials who have our greatest good in mind, and all they can really do because of some rules, some cosmic rules, they can't interfere with us directly. They can't tell us point blank, like, hey, your reason to be is to evolve or whatever, but they can help us. And then that the opposite, that there's another group that's trying to dissuade us not to do that. And so an easy way to be dissuaded from following our highest potential would be to, look at your phone all day or whatever. And so, I can buy it like that, as if it's metaphorical rather than like, this iPhone, it contains the devil. Like, I don't think it's so fantastic as that. I just think that like this thing it's another extreme door down a narrow path to a specific end, which is, taking your mind away from the main point, I feel like.
Yeah, and I don't know if I projected this or if Lily directly said it, but the way I read it was that it's not like the aliens are literally an outside being outside of the earth creating coincidences. It's that the aliens are us. They're the higher level of us. They're like, if you imagine me and you together creates a higher thing. It's not just myself and yourself. It's literally our consciousnesses together create a higher path. Like we have these collective goals, these collective things. So it's almost like if you took the whole world as like we all make up the alien.
But also, just without taking it to that extreme, on an individual level, you could just say that like, my soul or whatever other word you want to put that into, like that thing sees from a different level. We can't communicate, and yet it's making circumstances from here, leading me down, showing me things so that maybe I will get it. And like that is an alien to me while I am asleep, while I'm conditioned, while I don't know myself as this higher self. There's no dialogue between them. That is an alien too. So I buy that.
That is, but again, that would be when it comes to, for me, and again, I don't think he directly said this, but this is how I visualize it. It's kind of like that, again, the same pyramid, the same triangle that we're talking about, where we're on the surface level, right? And then there's these connections, these nodes that lead all the elements together and collaborate them into some kind of higher order, right? And so for you to say like it's me, soul behind me, that's still a personal thing. That's still a one node thing. To me, what I'm saying is we are the souls. We are the souls of our separate selves. The next level up is the collaboration of multiple. So,
That's
and then
true.
the next label up is a further distillation. And then it keeps going and going until there's the final one, which is the connection of all souls together.
I mean, we agree. Yeah, I mean, from whatever level you're speaking from, you could say that we're all connected there. But if you come down above where we usually sit, and yet not where our two souls meet or share a common field, there's still a distance between me and, for now, from this vantage, my personal soul connection or whatever. But you go farther up and they're all connected. I get that too. I'm just saying, like, without even taking it to the biggest view of that picture, I mean, just this unknown relationship between something just a little bit outside of your reach is enough without even adding any more.
And what I'm saying, it's kind of like a prism. When you put a light through a prism and it reflects all the different lights through, all the different colors and stuff, and separates them, even though they're all coming from that same beam of light. Right. There's a part where all those colors intersect, like as they are coming out and splitting into the individualness, right? There's the overlapping area. Just like that Ishtok Bentov picture, there's the overlapping areas. And what I'm saying is we as individuals are the part of the prism that is an individual. And when we talk about any higher self, anything that's behind me or seeing something from afar that can make some kind of connections, what I'm saying that is literally the next stage up is me to you, Rick to Bodhi. Like,
I don't know.
Connection between us and things and everything around us and the environment is the next stage up. Like, to me plus you equals the next being above us. It's something that can see more than one perspective. We are the one perspective.
I don't know. I mean, like, this is all just words, but I think before the connection happens, there's still something that is not connected to you. I don't think that the next step is us together, or the sum of us. I don't know about that. I mean, you could say that from my point of view, the next step up into this soul that is my soul, from my point of view, not connected with yours, but at the level that it exists in, it is at the same level as yours, and so they share. If you want to be like picky about it, I mean, like, I would accept that, but I'm just saying, like, I don't think the next one is the you know.
The way I think about it is, I am Rick. How can I be anything greater than myself? How can I be anything greater than Rick? What does it take to make that happen?
Well, because you're not Rick. And I mean, so what I'm saying is, before we get into the stage you're talking about, I guess what I mean is that one needs to realize that you're not who you think you are. You're not this level at all. This level is a shadow. And so this doesn't even really count. It's not even actually on the spectrum. This is like the most base version that we can present, and the most individual we can be perceived as. But deep in us, this thing that wakes up is, the potential beyond what I think this thing is. And I think you have to wake up to what you are. And I think that waking up place, we would wake up on a plane next to each other. And so be sharing something where both of what we're saying makes sense. It's just I'm just putting like something in between these 2 points, something subtle that I'm picking up on. That's the way I'm seeing it.
And again, it really just, boils down to semantics at that point. Because I think we're saying the same thing, because from the description you just gave me, where you're waking up, what I would say is that you have now become greater. You've now grown through time by adding some new element into your psyche or mind or something like that.
I wouldn't call it that at all, though. And so, I mean, there's no addition, there's no subtraction waking up.
Again, completely agree.
Right.
And I would even use the word recognition, but still that word is subpar. It's not even.
I think that you can wake up to a fuller sense of yourself without you can open up, but not be, I don't know. Tell me why you think the next step has to include a mixture of our essences. Why is it that I have to go outside of myself, if you will, in order to go beyond myself? Or can I just eliminate this self that I think I am and go beyond myself, still as myself, and then mix with you? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That's the subtle difference. I mean, I don't think you're accounting for that part of it.
You're just saying like you become a greater version of yourself inherently. It's not like you're adding anything to yourself. It's not like you're subtracting anything to yourself. There is no Rick to Bodhi connection. It's just more Bodhi.
Or it's less Bodhi, but at the same time more Bodhi. And
just dissipating into the rest.
Yeah, I think like you could say there's a subtraction in that there is a subtraction of the limitation, which is ultimately fictitious anyway. So it is a subtraction of something abstract, so it's not a subtraction.
Honestly, I think right now you're butting up against that spot where you can't explain it any further. Like, I know what you're saying. You literally just can't. You're not going to be able to. So, but I understand what you're getting at, and yes, I completely agree.
Right.
And what I'm saying is, by the recognition that you are me, I am you, and all that's the same, yes, it is Bodhi. It is not Bodhi. It is both. It is neither. It's all at the same time.
Mm.
And all I'm saying is that there's two different perspectives to look at it. There's the more malleable, what I would call the field. It's literally, we're ripples on a field. That's all we are.
Mm.
Where that's literally what quantum mechanics tells us, is that we're just in these random quantum fields and we're just vibrations within that field, right? So then there's we're all the field. So we're all the same field. We ripple into each other and all that, right?
Sure. But
there's the perspective you can have, which most people have as human beings, which is where you separate those things. You have a more, space-time is more like a dot matrix, right? Where you can segregate dots away from each other, right? Sure. So when I was speaking, I'm speaking on, and I think both perspectives feed into an ability for the human mind to really associate with the whole idea, right? Like, you could think about it in the way of the field, which is great. You could think about it in the way of the dot matrix, which could be great, but sometimes it's seen as subpar, especially if you're trying to help yourself get to a greater mindset where you can start thinking about these things. But as far as the language of the dot matrix, that's what I'm saying is that Ishtok Bentov thing, where literally the next level up is a culmination of things, which to me is additive. It is me and you together. But then at the same time, you can have that perspective alongside, not even alongside, at the same time, simultaneously built into the system. You also have to recognize that we were that way at the same, and anyway, like we were already there.
We had the capability to be that way, is how I took it. So like when those areas, intersect of our, at the base level, separated lines, but when they intersect, I think of this thing where the intersected section as a new system, not necessarily me or you in it.
And that's in the dot matrix, it would be a new system.
So, I mean, like the capability was always there, but, but you know, where you are at the base is less of those possibilities, you know, I mean, obviously, right? I mean, so where you intersect, I mean, like those are the points with all of the things that constitute your wave right now or whatever, like that is the possibilities that would fall into that field. But
so this is
where we are picking, you know, we are stuck in not those possibilities that are open on that higher level. But
exactly. And so, you know, when you talk about wave rate, and again, this isn't exactly how it works, but I'm just going to use that as an illustration. I'm producing a certain frequency, a wave frequency that is Rick. You're producing one that is Bodhi. Ours together create a new frequency, which is really the culmination of all aspects of that system. So it's the Rick, it's the Bodhi, it's together, and it's neither. All those things kind of equal the system that are Rick and Bodhi, right? So there is me, there is you, there is an us together, which is the new thing, right? But really the whole system is those three things interacting and not interacting all at the same time.
And then when you look up, there's connected to connect
exactly.
forever.
So there's a Rick, there's a Bodhi, there's an alien, which is the culmination of both of us. That is when we come together, whether we don't know what the goal is when we come together, right?
Or what will happen. Yeah.
We'll try to have one, you know.
Control.
Exactly. But there is something. There's something at the end as we move into the future and we intersect and we become one thing and we do things together and collaborate and whatever you want to call it, interact within space-time. There's something at the end of that we can't see as limited beings within this realm, right? I don't know what our future holds for me and you. I don't know where this podcast goes. I don't know where our friendship goes. I don't know where our business partnership goes. I don't even know where our thoughts on politics, and we don't know where any of this is going to go. But what we do know is that through all of time, we've come to certain points along that timeline that we have intersected and had a collaboration. We already know that happens. So we can assume in the future, if we continue this collaboration, that there's going to be some greater thing between the two of us that is created. So again, that's all I'm saying is like on the dot matrix, yes, me, you, alien, literally that ethereal future projection, higher consciousness goal thing that we cannot know, but it knows us because it already was us and it is us, right? And then what I think you're saying again is like, there's the whole system. There's like, I am already you, you are already me, we're already the alien. We are one whole system working together. And this little Bodhi right here down at the bottom left, you can recognize that whole system as part of yourself, which then helps you to recognize the goal in the future more optimally.
See, I don't know. I don't know if that is what I'm saying. I hope that's not what I said.
I'm putting it in my own words, and maybe I'm elaborating and extending it into my theories. But I'm just saying, to me, I'm trying to reflect it back into how I would put it. That's all. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that Bodhi is extending, and that it is something for him to use optimally for a future. I wouldn't even bring all that into it, because I'm saying if a Bodhi could open up like that and see these, you know, into that field, wake up, that, I mean, it's going to have less of me. And that's my point in the whole thing. I mean, it's not an extension. But I mean, this thing that I take myself to be will still be there throughout time. You know, there will be a physical extension, but that's not what I mean. You know? By opening up consciousness, it's the body's irrelevant at that, on that. So, I mean, inwardly, you're dropping this abstraction, which is nothing. So you're not subtracting anything, and you are opening up, but you're not becoming greater than you've ever been. And that is an impersonal process. It's beyond the person or whatever. So we all share that. We can all get there. We're talking about the doors. Technology could be a door, you know. Religion is the, you know, the old door. But I guess what I was just trying to say is that before we worry about, like, I understand why me and you break it down this way, but for everyone listening, if they are, like, so before we get into that, I think the first, before we talk about what it means, this alien and the node and this, this culmination greater than the sum of me and you separately, like whatever that is, before that happens though, in this spot where the individual takes itself to be, this thing has to happen first. With all that just out of mind, really. I mean, and you can start with the intention to open up without that part involved. You can keep it personal or whatever. So I think that's the most important part. So can we bring it back to technology then? So can we agree on that? Do you understand what I mean? That to me, I'm saying that the most, and this is, I think, Kay's point of view, is that the most important thing is to disidentify with this limited, conditioned, imaginative person. That's at the first. That's the first thing. And so if we can use that technology, technology as it is and is used by most people and like conceived of by most people is going to take them farther away from that.
Yeah.
So, and it's going to be a lot harder the longer it goes on to get their attention, because literally people will not give you, enough attention. Like they will literally be like, oh yeah, I'm also listening, and do that whole thing. So it is not taking us that direction if we allow it to take us where it will. You kind of said something about that earlier about conditioned responses. You could go butt naked into the forest, but something, you don't do that. You have options, but you are going along a path that you say is most optimal, that comes out naturally, that flows back out. That can go wrong if it's not in the right direction. And if you don't have the intention to be this person that you, whatever, all your interests and all that stuff, it's not going to go that direction. So we've talked about that again, like psychedelics. How do you go into it? How do you look at it and all that stuff? So how do you get the attention of somebody who's looking at a thing in a certain way, that's keeping their attention in a certain way, that you're trying to tell them something about that process and they're not hearing it because they're in that process? This is who we have to talk to. This is who, this is the bank teller or whatever. This is anybody. Who the fuck am I to that person? So like, why would they listen to me? There has to be some sort of reason for that, some openness already in our conversation to even approach that kind of thing. So this is not normal conversation. So, and again, why I think this question or this portion of it is important is because this is the greatest number of people. We can talk to each other and come to our conclusions, and whatever that means, I'll use this thing less, or I'll use it in that other way to optimize my growth or whatever. But I'm still living in the world where, the system's pushing everything forward, but we are constructing something in such a way that it's kind of like that game where there's a bunch of quarters on the ledge and you get that thing to push it. Like the system's going to push it, but it's going to crumble over because of how we're making it and how we're using it and looking at it and things like that. So, as always, I was going to bring this up last time. There is a conversation that Krishnamurti had with somebody, and they were talking about this like Hindu story, and he was using these words. I don't know what the words are. There's a word that means, not mature, somewhat mature, mature. And so Krishnamurti's like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. So you're asking, how is it, Krishnamurti, how can, he's going out to talk to anybody. And he's saying that there is a person who is in the lowest rung, who I think we are referring to a lot, whatever that word is he used, that they're totally asleep. Anything you say, anything you do, it doesn't matter. They're not going to listen to you. And the second rung up is a guy who, maybe he's going through something and he'll listen for a little while. And maybe he'll take some of it and incorporate it. Maybe he won't. It depends on his mood. And then there's the person in the top level who will really listen, who will really hear what it is Krishnamurti is saying. And this hearing includes hearing it so completely that they're, awake. That's the mature person. And so this person was asking Krishnamurti, what do you do about this problem, about the three different types of people? And Krishnamurti just said, you speak to all of them. You just speak anyway. So, and the right ones will come along. Nevertheless, I still have to point out yeah, but damn, that's a lot of people on that lowest rung. Just, they'll never listen. So, I mean, that's a tough one. I guess maybe insoluble. We can move on from how to talk to the unlistenables or whatever you want to call them.
Well, I think it's a salient point, and I really think it's the one that we've been making for the past 10 minutes, which is, or at least I've been making, trying to point to. And Krishnamurti, what you just described, puts it in a very elegant way, but I really feel it boils down to the connection. You have to connect. You have to. The way in isn't always with the intention of getting in for to make a certain point,
Well, yeah, I think actually that closes the door most times.
Exactly. So it's find whatever the connection is, just find the connection. And over time, by you embodying the principles that you do, if you make a connection with somebody and they're willing to stick around and have conversations, not even in regards to what we're talking about, obviously, eventually, you're going to be bringing stuff like this up just in normal conversation, like little bits and pieces. And then that's where the connection gets started, created, and solidified. And that's what most people don't do. They start off with the intention first. It's no, I need to tell you my point, or else this relationship isn't going to work. It's how about you just create a relationship first?
I mean, and relationships
feed off the chip.
I mean, they will work without the ideology behind it. I mean, that's the thing that separates. So
exactly.
Yeah.
So connect, and again, it's the connection, the me plus you. You need to start there. That's just.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that's the maturity. That's I will talk to you and I will listen to you wholly, no matter what. And I kind of liked what you also, when you were describing, somebody listening to Krishnamurti wholly and intently, where you kind of make that flip. When I imagine, when you said that, what I imagine is it's like you become Krishnamurti. You're literally, you're embedding yourself in his mind to, when people say walk in another person's shoes or see from another person's perspective, again, we've talked about that, where most of the time what we do is we see somebody else's perspective through our lens. No, you need to fully adopt, try to think and understand and contemplate and imagine where this person has been, what they have been through to say these things. Not just the things themselves, not the words that are coming out of their mouths, but how did they formulate those ideas?
Well, and that's all he ever talked about, kind of. And he always said, don't take my word for it. So it's not even necessarily getting into his mind, but getting into the mind that came to that conclusion, which he always, that's all he really ever does, is walk you through how he got to these statements that he makes, and then says, don't listen to me though, find out. Yeah. And so, I mean, if you can hear him when he is saying that doesn't depend on him, it's not I'm getting into his mind who said, find out yourself. I mean, you are so with whatever it is that he's describing about the mind, that it somehow just clicks by itself. And I would say it's not that you get into his mind, but that you are sharing this plane of awareness,
And that's why most of his talks are actually conversations, not talks. You can't, it's hard to cultivate that connection when it's you to a giant room full of people. There needs to be interaction. There needs to be connection. There needs to be some kind of evolving together.
there definitely is a togetherness when he just speaks to the crowd. I mean, I actually find those the most striking when he speaks alone, and when he doesn't take questions readily, when he just speaks for like 15 or 20 minutes about a point. I think he says some of the greatest stuff, because a lot of other conversations he has, every participant like injects something of themselves that he always has to correct them. And so like that's half of any conversation.
Yeah, but you're already there though. You're already fully paying attention.
Well, I don't know. I mean, some of these conversations were with people that like spent time with him in a room daily for, decades. They would have conversations with him. And even after all those years, he would still correct them and be like, well, I don't know a minute, because evidently you weren't listening to me all those times. And so he would always...
They're injecting their own personal, where you are trying to have a personal connection with Krishnamurti.
Well, what do you mean?
Like, even if he's speaking, you're watching a video of Krishnamurti sitting at your house and he's speaking to a bunch of people, right? Mm-hmm. You are trying to learn from Krishnamurti. You're trying to have a personal connection.
I mean, the connection's there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then somebody else starts speaking. Now they're interjecting their personal connection into your dialogue with Krishnamurti, even if your dialogue is literally just you listening to him.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
And the only reason I bring that up is again, I'm trying to keep pointing to, there's a connection there in some way, shape, or form.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
not
for
even,
sure. No doubt.
It's just another way to look at it. It's just,
Sure. I mean, I thought of these earlier. These are two different statements Krishnamurti said, but put them together, they're pretty interesting. One is life is relationship, which we just said right there. Life, you can't exist completely alone or you'll die, obviously. Life is relationship, period. Next statement, thought is the most deadly thing in relationship. I'm saying here? Mm-hmm. Thought. This most base thing, this separative thing, is the most deadly thing in relationship, which is life. That's fucking interesting, man. So like, yeah. So that's why Kay would say something like that, is his point was always that thought is the issue. The thinker of thought is the separator, which is a huge driving force even behind, like, we're taking technology and we're revolving around that, but it goes in like all human spheres, thought, like that's the driving force. So when I'm asking that question, like, well, what do we do about, those people, whatever, it's because the driving force with them is thought. And, in America, in the West, we have an emphasis on the self, the person, the ego or whatever. And it's like, that self-driving force is in everything that we do, especially us. So inevitably, whatever we, spend time with, technology, whatever, we're going to put that corruptive element into the situation. Mm-hmm. So that is our problem, I think, more so than asking like how to get to the next step or like where is it going as it is. It's just like, let's hold on here and recognize that we are all operating in a sort of backward fashion, just all over. I mean, like in every sphere, thought first, ass backwards,
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that's the driving force of the technology makers and consumers. We always got to come back to that,
Yeah.